New tools for cybersecurity with Brendan Sullivan, CTO and CIO at RigNet. Good afternoon, Brendan. How are
Good
you?
afternoon. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you to accept our conversation. Brendan, the number of cyber attacks in the world seems to be increasing. The question is it real? And do you have numbers and case that you can bring into us?
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's increasing, right? When you talk specifically about energy, it's always been a pretty highly attacked place, right? Going up to 2020, for the 3 years before that, probably 53% of the cyber attacks were in against energy worldwide. But no doubt with COVID hitting and everybody going to work from home, depending on whose study you read, it's increased between 400 and 600% the amount of cyber attacks we're seeing.
Wow.
And clearly, the type of attacks are changing because with everybody working from home, it's increased the attack surface quite a bit. So, in energy, a lot of people were working in offices or in physically very secure locations, and now they're rushed to work from home. IT companies really weren't fully set up for that type of remote access. And even just, bringing to someone's home network is a lot easier than a corporate network. So there are lots and lots of opportunities now to attack people.
And at home, do we not have the same, let's say, protection that you have at offices?
Not really, right? I mean, you would hope that most companies are investing in two-factor authentication and VPNing back into the office. But most companies probably weren't set up for 100% of their employees to VPN into their network. And so they were scrambling to roll things out like Zoom, right? And then generally speaking, just home networks really aren't that secure, right? If in the United States, if you're using AT&T or Comcast, a lot of times, your home router is set to password, the admin, username, and you could just Google the password. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when you think about most consumers aren't security trained, that leaves a real big hole for the corporate security folks.
Yeah, and considering the energy complex, I mean, nuclear, oil and gas, renewables, which of them are most vulnerable at this time?
So, oil and gas is more vulnerable than the electrical grid or nuclear power, and the reason is the energy grid, at least in the United States, but in a lot of places, has been heavily regulated. I mean, they've had more regulation on what you need to do to secure those things than oil and gas has. Oil and gas has been very focused on HSE and safety, but they haven't really been as focused on cybersecurity. The other big thing that's really going on in oil and gas is this transition to the Internet of Things and AI and OT, right? Operational technology. So oil and gas has to learn how to make more margin on a barrel of oil. And to do that, they have to start to censor up everything, punch holes in all the firewalls, and get that data back, to shore to be processed it. And so when you're, as an industry, going through that, even before COVID and the compounded problem of all your employees being at home, just starting to network all your offshore assets and your land assets, that was already a big increase in the attack vector. And so there was already a problem going on in 2019 that was getting worse. And then COVID made it twice as bad. Now, the other problem is, most energy companies knew that they had to make investments. And then you go through the double black swan event. And most cybersecurity is seen as insurance, right? So those were the first budgets that were slashed and burned. So going into 2020, we knew that we needed to make a bunch of cyber investments, and then all the money was cut. Yeah. And when you're furloughing 20% of your workforce or whatever, and you're just trying to survive, do you really spend the money on insurance? I think not, right? And so, call it a triple black swan event, if you will, in the cyber world. Because the attacks went up, the surface area to attack went up, and then all the money was taken away.
Yeah, interesting because IT OT convergence and probably IoT sensors in a long distance from the commands may be a vulnerable door for cyber attacks. No.
Well, right, because in the past, a lot of your like the drill room, right, or your thrusters, they were on a closed air gap network. Like if you weren't on board that vessel, you couldn't get onto that network. But now you're forced to network them and send that back to land. Well, what's to keep someone very sophisticated, to attack back on the path the other way? And the thing about oil and gas, the amount of money and the amount of gross domestic product, these are not teenage hackers. These are organized state level actors. This is how the Russians, the Chinese, those types of state entities, the Iranians are involved in, right? So you're trying to defend against the best hackers in the world.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And what are the tools that are being used to protect the systems? Are there new tools or are the same and the rules are changing? What do we have as new solutions?
Yeah, the good news is there are a bunch of new tools. It changes very dynamically. So, we probably want to separate out how to protect remote workers from home from the OT set of tools, but there's advances going on in both, right? The big one really is using AI for defense. So starting around 2019, the attackers started to use AI to try to break into your network. And it doesn't matter how many security analysts you have in a SOC with eyes on glass, when your attack vectors change all the time and they say, hey, look over here, and have 5 or 10 fake attacks going on while the real attack is over on this side, there's just not enough bodies in the world and enough hours in the day to defend against that when you're getting programmatically attacked by a machine learning engine. So what happened is, you're starting to see them roll out the defensive AIs. So now you got AI warfare and cyber going on. We partner with a great company called Darktrace, which is, a big London-based. It's been around for a while, but it's been growing very, very rapidly. And that we use that AI software in our intrusion detection to try to combat all the AI attacks. So that's a big innovation that's going on in the world of cybersecurity. By the way, just as you come up with defenses, they're coming up with new attacks.
Yeah. When you mention AI to protect the systems, means that the intelligence software can predict and can, let's say, protect the system. How does it work, the AI in the protection?
So most systems are looking at, in an organization, who is talking to who and over what period of time, and they're looking for anomalies in that. So most sophisticated breaches, they'll steal the credentials of the director of IT, because that's very hard for an AI engine to figure out, right? They work all hours, they're in all different parts of your network, right? So usually you have partition networks with layers of defense, right? And in today's technology, if you kind of funnel it through and you open up the packets and you just look at the headers, you can see that, hey, these people are talking to these systems, and you can figure out, hey, this is the CFO of a company, this is the CEO, and they keep talking to this part of the network, and so by breaking into a network and profiling it, you can start to figure out where the really sensitive data is. Now, what happens with good intrusion detection software is it starts to learn who exactly is on your network regularly, and then it realizes that somebody else that's not identified is now on that network and they shouldn't be there. Or it sees a big shift, like it knows that the CEO is in the United States, and suddenly they're logged in from Singapore. Well, guess what? Their identity's been stolen, right?
Something abnormal.
Yeah, they look for abnormal patterns, and machine learning is really good at that, right? Because you can throw it millions and millions of headers of communication and let it do it. Now, what's tricky is, we're also trying to encrypt everything. So when you're broken in, it's only a matter of time, right? You want to actually encrypt everything so if they steal something, they can't open it. Well, encryption and detection are like mortal enemies.
Yeah.
So the more you encrypt, the harder it is for the AI to detect it. So there's this constant balancing about where you can tap in the network and how you encrypt it. So it's very complex.
Interesting. And Brandon, how the companies are working? They are making contracts and hiring specific, as you mentioned, specific companies, intelligent companies to protect and to help them, or are they working together? And the government, what's the role of government in this let's say complex system? They are participating or only a reference?
So you're going to see a trend that's already started, but you're going to see more of it, of people outsourcing security, particularly their secure operations center. And the reason is there, even with the downturn that's going on right now in the last year, there's a huge negative unemployment rate of trained cyber professionals. Right now, there are over 300,000 job openings in the United States and over 1 million worldwide. And simply, universities cannot produce enough trained people to fill these roles, right? Because it's growing too fast. So it's even worse in oil and gas because how you do cybersecurity in oil and gas is similar to how you would do cybersecurity at like a bank. And so with this downturn and we lay people off, those cyber experts are leaving oil and gas, and guess what? They're not going to come back. Hey, I want to go into some vertical that's a lot less cyclical like this, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing is, it's to the level of sophisticated security I'm talking about, and to have a really sophisticated intrusion detection system and a really sophisticated event management system. Typically, you're going out and buying like enough tools that you need a team of at least 14 highly trained professionals to be able to use all those tools and to be able to integrate them. Then over time, after spending millions of dollars, you might be able to shrink that staff down because you're using automation. Most small companies, mid-sized companies, even in oil and gas, can't afford or won't fund, that big of a security team. So you're better off going to something like, RigNet's managed service security thing, RSOC, because we're going to take economy of scale. We're going to have experts that are military trained, top secret trained, and have all those tools. And then we're going to spread that cost out as a shared service, right? And so that's going to be a big trend. As far as the government and really the private enterprises are starting to up regulation around cybersecurity. Like I mentioned, the utilities grid is already heavily regulated, NERC and CERC. The government has, very high standards on things like encryption, and like the U.S. NIST lab has begun, and a thing called FIPS 140-2 is becoming a global standard. So the government is starting to do, at least the U.S. government, but I think most governments is really starting to do a lot of initiatives around cybersecurity, and at least they're setting policy, and they are also setting up sharing systems. So like in the U.S. we have a GovCert or InfoGuard. These agencies collect attack profiles from all over the place and then publish it back every day. So when you think about the SolarWinds attack that went around the world, it was really the GovCert that got together a couple of companies, really analyzed, and then published the solution out to everybody within 24 hours. So they can be quite helpful. In the United States, there's also a new security standard coming out this year called CMMC, which is for the Department of Defense. And so it's really based on a lot of this NIST, risk management framework, but they're going to force all government contractors, who want to work with the U.S. government to be CMMC certified. So that level of regulation is going to force another huge amount of people having to focus on cybersecurity or they're not going to be able to do business with the U.S. government.
And you mentioned something interesting, because in the interface between providers and the companies that are hiring, so this interface may be something vulnerable, no?
Yes. So what what you've seen about a 25% increase in is something that people weren't worried about until about, in November and December, which is what's called supply chain attacks. So you could have a network service provider like a RigNet, and if they're not helping you secure your network, that's a vulnerability. But then what supply chain attacks are, it might be your billing feeds, or in this case, standard knock tools that touch your network. They were able to get into the supply chain of delivering the updates of that software and infect 30,000 companies,
Yeah.
and half the US government too. That was an escalation by, again, state level actors in a war that's been going on, quietly, a cyber cold war that's been going on for over 10 years. But that took it to a whole nother level. You saw that with the SolarWinds attack. You saw that with Mimecast, the antivirus software that is in front of email. And so this ability to break into open source software and then distribute it to all the Fortune 500 companies at once, that is a really scary new trend, and something that you're going to see the whole world have to react to, right? Tighten up their supply chain things, more auditing. You're going to see more patch management. You're just going to see a change the way we have to use open source software because of this new threat.
Yeah, interesting. So do you expect that we can grow these numbers in the near future, or make stable in terms of number of cases?
I think, I think that we're just going to, every corporation is going to have to invest more in cybersecurity. I think there's a lot more awareness of it. I think it's here to stay. I do think it's growing, the cost and the damage and the war is growing too fast. So we need to slow it down and get to a plateau. I don't think we're going to be able to go back to where we were 10 years ago, where kind of our head was in the sand and the security team did a checklist. You asked 5 questions, you filed it away and never looked at it again, right?
Never more.
We're in a world now where you need machines attacking your network from the outside every second of the day, attacking from the inside out. And you need to go to what they call a zero trust network, which is just assume every single network you cross, and nobody's on a completely private network, right? They're all hybrids. They're all infected, right? And then how do you make sure you can operate in an environment that's always untrusted, right? And big thing going on there that you're seeing is hardware-based encryption. So all the way from the endpoint to the other side, you're using hardware that can't, it's not doing any shared secrets or anything that transports over the network. It's using hardware as the root of trust. Then, it doesn't matter if you're crossing the internet, a satellite, a microwave shot, back to the internet, back to your private WAN. You controlled that key from A to Z, and now you can operate your business in a completely untrusted environment. So these zero trust network designs, I would say, is another big trend you're going to see in technology here quickly. Like, they need to get this out ahead of the growth of IoT. IoT is using consumer grade security. It's not very good, right? So as you start to network, even SCADA systems for pipelines or artificial lift things, you can drive down the road in Texas and see an artificial lift station. Yeah. There might not even be a fence around it, or it might be 4 feet high. So you don't want someone to be able to walk up and physically tamper with that. It's not sitting in some big secure data center, right? And it's not sitting in the cloud behind $1 billion cloud security system. It's physical. And so we need to really start rolling out devices that protect OT before too much of this is networked together. Because once you plug it all together, it'll be too late.
Untrust networks, untrust worlds.
Yeah. Just assume they're all untrusted world.
Yeah, that's assuming that be protected the maximum that we can. Excellent, Brandon. Brandon Sullivan, CTO and CIO at RigNet. Thank you very much for the conversation.
It was my pleasure. It was nice talking again.